So I remember that, my weed journey went through a few different stages where I think I started around 15 years old, maybe even before that. And in the beginning, it was such a beautiful experience. It was something so different, something so... It's like it placed me in reality in a way that I kind of knew, but couldn't remember. And what I mean by that is everything felt fresh, everything felt alive, everything felt more vivid. And it was beautiful, and it was so innocent at that time too. That's kind of how I describe it sometimes. It felt innocent. And I think my relationship with it started to change, where I would start then using it when I was bored. So around 16 or 17, I would start doing it at home when I would either skip school or just got home from school before my mom got home. And I would smoke because I was bored and I wanted just some type of different experience. And that's when I realized that there were like the first sort of feelings of guilt or shame or fear started being tied into it. And then when I was about 22, 23, I started doing it more heavily. Like I became somewhat of a stoner. I was doing it almost every day sometimes. And that's when the feelings of guilt and shame and then paranoia became really intense, where to the point where every time I would smoke, I was almost anticipating it. And I knew that even though I enjoyed this different experience, I would have to battle this anxiety and paranoia whenever I would smoke. And it got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore, because not only was there all this anxiety and paranoia, but I would also then be super unproductive, and it would just feel kind of gross for some reason, especially because to the amount I was doing it. And it got to the point where I was like, you know what, fuck this. Weed is terrible. I'm done with it. I hate it. I'm never doing it again. And I stuck to that. I was like cold turkey, no weed for probably 2 or 3 years. And then it got to the point as I started practicing, just being more true to myself and understanding certain things there are no good or bad habits. It's just kind of how you use them. And I didn't fully understand that lesson, but I'd heard it and blah, 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 blah. But not only that, when I started practicing presence, through meditation and through breath work and things like that, I started loosening my grip on that, weed is terrible and I hate it. And there were about 1 or 2 times in the span of maybe a year or two where I smoked weed just to kind of see, just to kind of test the waters. And what I noticed in those moments is as I became more sort of secure in myself through presence, through meditation, etc., I was able to hold the state that I was in when smoking weed. And that really started shifting my understanding of it a bit more. Until one day, I had just gone through a near-death experience. And for whatever reason, I was pulled to take an edible to try and process that near-death experience. That's a story I'll go into another time. But basically, as I was pulled to take an edible, I was like, why? Why would I be pulled towards doing that? Why would I intuitively be pulled towards taking an edible right now to process this, when I know in the past it only made me more paranoid and everything? So I sort of felt into that, and I went through that whole journey that I told you about, my weed journey from 15 to 20, 23, 24. And I viewed it from a different perspective, and I said to myself, where did it go wrong? And why was it so different in the beginning versus later on? And I realized that in the beginning, it was the reason I was doing it. it was like I was curious, I was interested, and therefore when I smoked weed, it was coming from this very innocent place. And it put me into a space that I'll describe in a second, that I was almost more able to handle. And it was only when I started using it for avoiding or escaping that it started to build this sort of paranoia and this anxiety and this guilt and this shame. And what that made me realize was really what weed was doing was it was putting me in a state of presence that I wasn't yet ready for. Or if I was going into the state of presence through weed, it was if I was going in with the wrong intention, like, oh, I want to escape, I want to avoid, it was putting me in the state of presence where basically your subconscious opens up and it makes you face shit that you don't want to face. It makes you experience things in a very present, real way, which puts you face to face with like things that you're not aligned with. Your true self is not aligned with. So you're going in trying to escape and trying to avoid, but weed ultimately puts you in a state of presence that makes you face and really see what is not aligned with you. And when you're going into something with the wrong intention, the very thing itself is not aligned with you. And that's what you get faced with, and basically sends you into this like spiral, this paranoia, this like fear, this like shame and guilt. The shame and the guilt is basically showing you that you're doing this for the wrong reason. And it's actually the weed that's making you see that. So anyway, that was a really big realization for me. And as I had that realization, I went into this edible experience with a better intention, where I said, I'm going to let myself let go of shame and guilt, and I'm going to use this to process what I just experienced. And when I did, I slipped into this incredibly deep meditation that was actually probably one of the most fundamental shifting points of my life. And I was able to basically alchemize or process that near-death experience to the point where I unlocked so much understanding and was able to perceive life in a very different way. And it's brought me down this journey now to where I am. Anyway, so that was a very important realization for me. 20 minutes ago, I was doing a breathwork session where the goal is to also surrender and let go and come back to a state of presence. And I noticed something really interesting. Almost to close the loop and confirm everything I already kind of like felt into and knew and felt to be true and logically made sense. I was standing here in nature, completely sober, absolutely nothing going through me. I took my deep breath for breath work. I held it. I let myself completely relax. I kept my mind and my eyes open and focused, but not in control. And I took a long, deep breath out, and I went into that state of presence and surrender. And I noticed that the feeling I had, the way the world felt, the way I felt, the way I experienced everything around me, was exactly the same feeling of when a high feels good. Like when you're smoking weed and you feel good, like you feel that different type of, everything is vivid and alive. It felt like when I smoked weed for the first time. And that for me was the ultimate confirmation. No drugs, nothing but one breath. And this is because I practiced breathwork for a long time, by the way, and I'm used to surrender now. But one breath sent me into that same state that smoking weed sent me in like the first time. It felt beautiful. It felt alive. It felt real. It felt present. Exactly the same feeling. And you know what I'm talking about. Where things feel a little bit disorientated, but not necessarily, but everything's more vivid, more alive, more beautiful. You're there, but you're kind of not there from one breath. So that for me was an ultimate confirmation that that is what's happening when you smoke weed. Weed itself basically throws you or pushes you into a state of presence. And depending on where you're at in your journey, you're not going to be ready for that. Or if you're doing it to like escape or avoid, when you're in that state of presence from the weed, it makes you extremely aware of that. And then you feel guilty and you feel bad and you feel paranoid because like all of these subconscious fears are being brought up into you in that state. So I think really the message I want to share with you through this story is there's nothing wrong with smoking weed, number one. And that's probably a fucking massively controversial opinion. But there's nothing wrong with weed itself. There's nothing wrong with smoking, taking, doing weed in whatever way you do. It's the reason you do it that is going to make it aligned or misaligned, healthy or unhealthy. And you will fucking know if you're doing it for the right reason or not based on how you experience it in that moment. Because if you're being paranoid, if you are freaking out, if you're having insane anxiety, it's because a part of you, your subconscious, knows you're doing it for the wrong reason, or it's making you extremely aware of things that you need to work on, fears you need to face, subconscious beliefs you need to shift or let go of. So I'd like to invite you to start viewing the act or action of consuming weed in a different way. And I want to say I haven't smoked weed since that experience because I don't need it and I don't need to use it to escape anything. I also don't need it to process things anymore. It did what it needed to do. It unlocked what it needed to unlock. But what I do know is if I do ever do weed again, it'll be from the right place and right position, and therefore I know I'll go into it cleanly and I'll go into it without any paranoia or anxiety because I'll be doing it for the right intentions and reasons. And I also know I'll be able to handle that state of presence from a much more aware place. So again, this also is not an invitation to now just go smoke weed all the time. Actually, my other opinion would be weed is a tool, yes, but ultimately we want to be able to do and be and live and be in a state without needing any tools other than what is natural to us, aka the breath, like I explained, that I could use to get to the same state. Even on the other side, when you're using it in a good way, there's also a limit that way. There's also a sort of point where it becomes disadvantageous to you because you are disempowering yourself by needing to rely on a tool. Anyway, whole fucking can of worms we can go into here, but I hope this was helpful just for those of you who are struggling with paranoia and anxiety when consuming weed.